Welcome to the channel, all my friends. Today we are back on the IROC project. We will be replacing this master cylinder on this IROC. 89 Camaro Firebirds will be the same. It's fairly easy. Now my issue is this car has been sitting for a long time. Now that I finally got the braking system put back together, I seem to have no pressure coming from the master cylinder. It's leaking internally. It's just been dried up. A lot of crap inside, as you can see. So we will be changing that. So one thing I have done is pulled all the fluid out of the master cylinder reservoir. A couple of ways you can do that. I just have some containers at the bottom, loosened up the bleeder screws, and drained all the fluid out of the master cylinder. That you could do that a couple of ways. You can also take a slot vac and just suck all that fluid out of there. You will be replacing that with new fluid. Good idea. That just makes it less of a mess when you go to loosen up the lines. Otherwise, you're going to have brake fluid leaking all over the place. We'll go ahead and shut the bleeders off, and we'll start unbolting this master cylinder from the vehicle. Now, there's only two lines on this. One is here, and one is up here. They're a 14mm wrench. Now, you do want to take a line wrench to loosen those up. Once those are loose, you can take a open-end wrench and spin those off. Now, before you spin any lines off or anything like that, it's a good idea to cover the area around the master cylinder in case you spill some brake fluid. Remember, brake fluid tends to be corrosive. It will eat up the paint and start to rust the metal. So you want to have a little bit of a spray bottle handy with some soap, water to wash it off in case you do spill. Have plenty of rags handy. So we'll go ahead and get these lines loose and get these lines removed. Once we have those lines off, there is two 14mm nuts that we need to remove. One is here and one is on the opposite side here underneath. Now it is a good idea to crack the lines loose first before you unbolt the master cylinder from the booster unit, just because it's held in nice and tight there, and sometimes these lines do tend to be quite tight. So you want to loosen those up beforehand. And I have those loose. They're just finger tight now. And I can go ahead and loosen these 15mm bolts on both sides of this. And then we can just spin these off by hand and remove the master cylinder. So at this point we have the lines disconnected. I just put caps over them to prevent debris from going in there. We have the 15mm bolts off from both ends of the master cylinder, one here again and one on the other side here. Now, before you can pull this master cylinder off, there is a proportioning valve underneath that's also held on by a bracket that goes on the same studs here. As you can see, I've just pulled that off. Once you pull that off of the studs, you should be able to pull it off just like so. Now at this point we can go ahead and pull our master cylinder from the vehicle. Again, you will get some fluid leakage, and we can pull that off just like so. So here I have the new master cylinder, just comparing it to our OEM one. Fairly close. Now again, this is not OEM, it's an aftermarket one. It's fairly identical. It does come with these plugs for the lines to bench bleed this master cylinder. So we'll be using these to bench bleed it before it's installed. And of course I did paint the master cylinder to kind of match the color scheme I had. That's how my original was. It was painted black. So I got a fresh coat of paint on here. Let's get this thing bench bled and we'll install it on the vehicle. So I have the threaded plugs that it came with, and I got those threaded and just tightened up with pliers. Just so it doesn't leak. So now we'll go ahead and get this master cylinder mounted into a vise or somehow clamp it somewhere to where we can bench bleed this. Now here you can see my setup for bench bleeding. I've just kind of mounted it to the side of a cabinet using a C-clamp. I've put some fluid in the master cylinder. Now all we need to do, I'm going to use a screwdriver. You can pretty much use anything. You just want to be careful when you're pushing this so you don't slip and score the side of the cylinder. So you do want to be careful of that. So only thing that we need to do is just push this slowly. I have the plugs on to where the lines go, the plastic plugs that came with it. So we just need to push it slowly. So we'll take our screwdriver, give that a push, and you can see the air bubbles coming out. You want to do that a few times until you get all the air bubbles out. So it's very important to bench bleed these. Of course, you can do it on the vehicle. When it is actually on the vehicle, sometimes you can't get the piston to go all the way, and you'll actually get left with air in the front here, and that's something you can't get out unless it's on the bench. So I was able to push that piston in and out quite a few times with my screwdriver, and it looks like there's no more bubbles coming out of there. It looks like we have bled it. Now when you're doing this at any time, you want to make sure that your master cylinder does not run out of fluid. Otherwise, as you're performing the bleeding process, you're sucking air in. So even when we remove this knob, we want to make sure these holes are always covered with fluid. So you want to have enough fluid in it. So at this time, we'll go ahead and get the cap on. Now that we have the master cylinder bench bled, we're ready to go ahead and install it on the vehicle. Before you do that, you want to make sure this push rod that's in here, you want to make sure that's in place. Sometimes they do tend to fall out, or as you can see, they just pull in and out. You want to make sure that is in position and not miss. So I was able to go ahead and tighten up these 15mm nuts that are holding the master cylinder to the booster. Now don't forget your bracket for the proportioning valve, because that ties right into that also. Now that our master cylinder is bolted in place, we can go ahead and start removing these plugs and putting our lines back in. Now, you might want to cover the area again, because as soon as you loosen these caps, you are going to have brake fluid leaking out of there. So you want to try to do that as quick as possible so you don't have brake fluid all over the vehicle. So I was able to get both of these lines on without having brake fluid all over the place. Now at this point you may think you're done, but you're not. There still may be air trapped in the system since we had these lines off. Obviously there is an air trap just about right here. Now there's a couple different ways you can deal with that. You can have somebody get in the car, depress the pedal while you loosen these lines. All you gotta do is crack them loose, and you'll see the brake fluid with air will come out of there. You can do that a few times if that helps. Another way of doing it, I'm actually just letting it gravity bleed. That way it flushes all the fluid out of the system. So I've loosened up all the bleeder screws on all the calipers, and I have a small hose, and we'll just let that drip. You can also have somebody depress the pedal when the fluid comes out. Tighten up the bleeder hoses, same thing you would do up top on the lines. That way you can also get some air out of the system. I got the backs and the front bleeding. Again, this unit did come with the plug style way of bleeding it, to where it's just plugs that you put on this to bleed the system. There are better options to bleed these. There's other ones that you can put in right where these lines go, and it comes with the tubes, and you can submerge those right into the reservoir here. That tends to bleed a little bit better and easier. I'll put the link to that bleeder kit in the comments for you. They're right on Amazon. They're cheap if that's what you want to do. So after letting this gravity bleed for a while, it seems that we got all the air out of the system. We got a nice firm pedal. I did in between close the bleeders off, pump the pedal up, and bleeded it a few times that way. Again, looks like we have all the air out of the system. You want to make sure there's no leaks around the line, around the bleeder if you have anything loose. But like I said, we have a nice firm pedal. Seems to be no issues. Everything is great. Now at this point, obviously you want to test drive it, but my car is not ready for that. I'm hoping this video will help somebody out. There's plenty more to do, so we'll keep going on this IROC project. I thank you for watching.